We've just got some breaking news in from Buckingham Palace, folks. So this statement has just come in from Buckingham Palace, and I'll read it for you. It goes on to say, His Majesty has today initiated a formal process to remove the style, titles and...
The palace orchestra was still playing when Catherine stepped beneath the chandeliers. But within seconds, the entire reception seemed to fall silent. Resting above her carefully styled hair was Diana's sapphire-and-diamond tiara, while the matching necklace gleamed against her gown. Across the room, Queen Camilla stopped mid-conversation. Her smile vanished, her hand tightened around her glass, and everyone nearby realized this was no ordinary royal appearance. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. Catherine felt the shock move through Buckingham Palace before anyone spoke. The evening reception had gathered royals, foreign dignitaries, officials, and guests, making every reaction impossible to hide. Buckingham Palace, the monarch's London residence, was built for controlled ceremony. Yet control disappeared when Diana's sapphire and diamond collection entered the room. Camilla had been speaking to two guests when her voice failed. She lowered her glass, stared across the ballroom, and searched Catherine's face for a sign the choice was accidental. It was not. The queen consort knew these jewels had remained sealed inside a royal vault for years, never worn together by the Princess of Wales at such a gathering. Their return carried grief, inheritance, and judgment. Catherine heard the whispers but kept walking. She touched William's hand, drawing strength from the future king as the crowd opened before them. The prince had approved the collection's release that afternoon, after receiving sealed authorization linked to his mother's private possessions. That authorization, a written approval allowing treasured items to leave secure royal custody, had arrived only hours earlier. Camilla had received no warning. A senior courtier leaned toward an aide and repeated a guarded secret. The Queen had previously asked that Diana's complete collection remain unworn during her lifetime, fearing that one appearance would create a comparison she could never control. Catherine did not hear those words, but William noticed the exchange. His expression hardened, and his hand remained close to hers. Charles crossed the room slowly. The king stopped before Catherine, looked directly at the tiara, and said nothing for seconds. Then he spoke with calm. "You understood the weight of wearing them." Catherine met his gaze and answered, "That is why I came." Charles gave the smallest nod, but Camilla had already turned away. Applause began for the first formal address. Camilla used the noise as cover, summoned her private secretary, and issued one cold instruction: discover who opened the vault, and who deliberately kept the decision from her. But the jewels were only the visible part of the shock. Beneath their brilliance stood three people carrying years of grief, rivalry, and unfinished family history. To the guests watching from beneath the golden ceilings, Catherine's appearance looked composed and majestic. But for Catherine, Camilla, and the memory of Diana, those jewels carried three entirely different meanings. One woman wore them as a responsibility, another saw them as a judgment, and the woman who had once owned them remained absent, yet emotionally present in every glance, every whisper, and every uncomfortable silence inside the palace. Catherine had spent years refusing to compete with Diana's memory. Every inherited necklace, ring, or tiara carried a message about motherhood, succession, and the future of the crown. Succession is the official order deciding who will inherit the throne. But inside this family, it also shaped how every public gesture was judged. The princess understood that wearing Diana's complete collection would never be treated as fashion. It would be read as a declaration. Only minutes before entering the ballroom, Catherine had stopped in a private corridor and turned to William. She asked whether the full set felt too confrontational. The prince studied her face before answering. Hiding the jewels, he said, would give fear more authority than history. He reminded her that she was not wearing them to imitate his mother. She was carrying them forward because the monarchy could not preserve its future by locking away its past. Camilla felt that meaning differently. The queen consort had spent years building her place beside Charles, earning public recognition through duty, patience, and endurance. Yet Diana's image still possessed an emotional power that no title or ceremony could erase. A royal title is the formal rank given to a member of the monarchy, but rank could not silence memory. Camilla knew that the moment Catherine entered, the comparison had begun again. The queen retreated into a small withdrawing room, a private chamber where royals could step away from formal events. She removed one glove and placed it sharply on the table. Her sister watched her struggle to control her breathing. Camilla admitted that seeing Catherine in the jewels felt like watching the palace choose Diana's legacy over her. Her sister tried to reassure her, but the monarch shook her head. The applause outside had already told her what words could not. William's decision had never been only a tribute. The future king believed the collection needed to move visibly toward the future queen, rather than remain sealed because the past made others uncomfortable. Catherine had initially refused the tiara. She changed her mind only after receiving a copied handwritten note that Diana had placed with the collection. The documented note expressed one wish: that the jewels should someday be worn by a woman who understood service rather than display. Catherine read those words alone before a mirror. Tears gathered in her eyes, but she did not remove the tiara. She straightened it gently and whispered, "I will carry this carefully." The note explained her courage, but not the timing. To understand why the jewels appeared that night, the palace had to return to a private ceremony where Camilla crossed a line William could no longer ignore. The decision did not begin in the royal vault. It began 4 months earlier inside the White Drawing Room, during a private anniversary ceremony meant to honor the women who had served the monarchy across generations. What should have been a quiet occasion became the moment William finally understood that Diana's memory was not merely being managed, it was being pushed aside. One sentence from Camilla transformed private discomfort into an irreversible family conflict. Catherine sensed trouble before anyone raised their voice. The closed ceremony marked the anniversary of a Royal Women's Charitable Foundation, an organization created to support causes connected to women and families. William, Camilla, Charles, Princess Anne, and several senior aides had gathered for what was meant to be a controlled tribute. Diana's sapphire-and-diamond collection was supposed to stand beside pieces linked to other royal women, proving that service could continue even after death. Camilla changed everything minutes before the guests entered. She stopped beside the display, studied the jewels, and ordered an aide to remove them. The queen consort said the collection would pull attention away from the living women still serving the crown. Her words were calm, but their meaning cut deeply. The crown, meaning the monarchy as an institution rather than merely the person wearing the crown, was being used to justify Diana's absence. William heard the sentence from the adjoining room. He entered at once, looked directly at Camilla, and asked her to repeat it. The prince did not shout. He did not need to. She refused to withdraw the instruction and insisted the ceremony should focus on present duty, not old emotion. He stared at her in silence, while Catherine watched him realize that this was no longer about balance. It was about control. Princess Anne stepped forward before the tension could be buried. She warned Camilla that removing Diana's jewels would look less like protocol and more like an attempt to rewrite the family's emotional history. Protocol means the formal rules and customs that guide royal events, but Anne knew no rule required the display to disappear. The Princess Royal repeated her warning in a documented account, later placed in the household record, making clear that she had challenged the decision directly. Charles heard every word and still chose not to reverse his wife's order. The king believed stopping the ceremony would create a larger scandal, but his silence wounded William more than Camilla's command. Later, the future king told Catherine in a recorded private conversation that the family had allowed discomfort to become erasure. She listened as his anger turned into something colder and more determined. William returned alone after the ceremony. He found the empty case and the unused plaque reading, "Diana, Princess of Wales." He picked it up before an aide could remove it and carried it away himself. That night, he began reviewing the private conditions attached to his mother's jewels. What he found changed everything. Camilla had never possessed the authority to keep Catherine from wearing them. Months of restrained anger now led directly back to the ballroom, where the Queen demanded an explanation from the woman she believed had challenged her position deliberately. The confrontation came before the first course was served. Camilla sent an aide across the ballroom with a request that sounded polite, but carried the force of a command. Catherine was to meet her immediately in the Blue Saloon. When Catherine entered, Camilla dismissed the attendants and closed the door herself. For the first time that evening, there were no guests, cameras, or courtiers between the two women. Only Diana's jewels and years of unspoken resentment. Camilla did not invite her to sit. The Queen asked why Catherine had chosen the complete collection instead of a single piece, insisting that the tiara and necklace together had transformed a tribute into a deliberate public statement. The Blue Saloon, a private palace room used for formal meetings away from the main reception, suddenly felt smaller than either woman remembered. Catherine answered that the set had been released legally, approved by William, and chosen for an evening built around continuity between royal generations. The accusation came quickly. Camilla said Catherine had allowed herself to become a symbol used against her. Her voice trembled as she admitted that the entrance had humiliated her inside the household she had spent years trying to serve. The Queen Consort had expected difficult comparisons, but not a moment so direct, so public, and so impossible to escape. Catherine listened without interrupting, yet her expression hardened when Diana's name was spoken like a threat. Catherine chose every word carefully. She said she was tired of William's mother being treated as a danger that had to be controlled. The princess explained that honoring Diana was not an attack unless someone decided to experience it as one. Her answer remained calm, but the force beneath it was unmistakable. Camilla stared at her, realizing the woman before her had stopped trying to soften the truth. The Queen then revealed how far her concern had already gone. In a documented private request sent weeks earlier, she had asked the Royal Collection Director to keep Diana's complete set sealed during every major event she attended. The Royal Collection is the official body responsible for caring for historic objects and artworks held by the monarchy. Camilla defended the instruction as protection against unnecessary conflict. Catherine's response landed harder than anger. She said she already knew. William had discovered the request during the jewelry review, and its existence had convinced him that the collection could no longer remain hidden. Camilla stepped closer and lifted one hand toward the necklace, stopping just before touching it. Catherine moved back gently. The small retreat changed everything. Camilla lowered her hand, shaken by the boundary Catherine had drawn without raising her voice. At that moment, the door opened. William stood outside, silent and waiting. His presence made one truth unavoidable. Catherine had not acted alone. Camilla had expected to challenge her choice, but she was unprepared to discover that William had turned the jewels into a test of where royal authority truly rested. William did not raise his voice when he entered the room, and that made his anger more unsettling. He closed the door, stood beside Catherine, and placed a small authorization folder on the table between them. Camilla looked down at the royal seal and immediately understood that the evening had been planned with greater care than she had imagined. The jewels had not slipped through palace protocol. They had been released through a decision she could not quietly reverse. William opened the folder and explained the chain of authority. Diana's private jewelry instructions had placed responsibility for future use with her sons and the senior royal custodian, not with the reigning consort. A royal custodian is the official trusted to protect and manage important royal possessions. The crown jeweler, the royal collection director, and a legal advisor had reviewed every stage before Catherine received the pieces. Nothing had been hidden from the law. Everything had been recorded. Camilla's anger sharpened. The Queen accused William of using royal procedure to punish her for a private disagreement. She said he had turned a family wound into a public display and forced her to stand beneath the shadow of a woman who was no longer there. The prince did not move. He answered that the punishment was not the jewels. The punishment was the fear created by keeping them unseen. William's voice softened when he spoke about Diana. The future king said he could accept the pain, mistakes, and divided loyalties surrounding the past. He could even accept that no one inside the family remembered those years in the same way. But he would not allow his mother's place in history to depend on whether others found her memory uncomfortable. Catherine remained beside him, knowing the words carried years of grief. The next revelation changed the room. William confirmed that Charles had signed the final transport approval that morning, though the king had not known Catherine intended to wear the complete set. Transport approval is the formal permission required before valuable royal objects can leave secure storage. Camilla stared at the signature, realizing her husband had unknowingly helped release the collection she had tried to keep sealed. William then produced a second page. Camilla's restriction had been entered into an unofficial household file rather than the formal archive, the permanent record used to preserve authorized royal decisions. Someone had attempted to enforce her wishes without proper legal authority. Charles entered before she could respond. The king read the unofficial instruction, slowly removed his glasses, and placed the paper on the table. Then he looked at Camilla and asked, "Did you authorize this wording?" She did not answer. That silence turned a family dispute into a palace investigation. The jewels remained on Catherine, but the authority surrounding Camilla began to fall away piece by piece as Charles examined what had been done in his name. When Camilla returned to the reception, the orchestra was playing again. The guests were smiling, and Catherine was speaking calmly with a foreign dignitary. Yet the room no longer felt the same. Camilla sensed people watching her reaction rather than her rank. She remained for only 12 minutes. Then, without waiting for the formal dinner announcement, she placed her glass on a silver tray, crossed the ballroom alone, and disappeared through a side door. Charles moved quickly once she was gone. The king instructed his private secretary to shorten the reception and begin an immediate review of the unofficial restriction placed on Diana's collection. A private secretary is the senior aide who manages the monarch's most sensitive duties and communications. The order mattered because the issue had moved beyond hurt feelings. Someone had tried to turn a personal request into royal authority without the proper approval. Catherine refused to leave. The princess stayed until the final guests had been received, even as whispers moved around her, and the weight of the jewels grew heavier by the minute. She understood that walking out would allow the conflict to swallow the purpose of the evening. William remained close, but he did not shield her from every stare. The future king knew she had chosen duty, and he respected the cost of that choice. Camilla reached her private sitting room and removed her earrings with trembling hands. The queen admitted to her sister, in a recorded private conversation, later summarized for the household review, that she no longer knew how people saw her. Was she their queen, or only the woman forever standing in Diana's shadow? Her sister tried to calm her, but Camilla's voice broke. Years of service suddenly felt powerless against one unforgettable entrance. Charles entered without offering easy comfort. The monarch told her that fear had created the very comparison she had tried to prevent. Camilla said she had only wanted to avoid humiliation. He answered that hiding Diana's possessions had made the wound deeper, not smaller. The truth landed hard because neither of them could deny it. The consequences arrived before the night ended. A household official confessed in a documented statement that he had placed the restriction in the unofficial file because he believed he was protecting Camilla from embarrassment. Instead, he had exposed an attempt to bypass established authority. Charles removed him from all jewelry and ceremonial responsibilities, then ordered every instruction involving Diana's possessions to be reviewed for interference. Camilla sat alone after the king left. She pressed both hands against the edge of a table and listened as distant applause rose from the ballroom below. Meanwhile, Catherine quietly considered removing the jewels. But William's next words would change the meaning of the entire evening. As Camilla faced the consequences of trying to control the past, Catherine and William were forced to decide whether they had defended Diana's legacy or simply reopened an old wound. Long after the guests had left, Catherine stood inside the palace's private jewelry room as an attendant prepared to return the collection to its case. Her confidence from the ballroom had faded. She asked William whether wearing the jewels had caused more pain than healing. There were no officials present, no advisors shaping their words, and no ceremony protecting them from honesty. His answer transformed the night from an act of confrontation into a promise about the future. Catherine could not stop thinking about Camilla's face. The princess feared Diana's collection would now be remembered for the queen's reaction, rather than for the woman who had once worn it. A private jewelry room is the secure palace space where valuable royal pieces are checked, recorded, and prepared for storage. Yet the real weight in that room did not come from diamonds. It came from what the jewels had awakened. William admitted he had expected tension. The prince knew the complete set would force the family to confront years of silence, but he had not expected the pain to become so immediate or so personal. He told Catherine that he had wanted the palace to stop treating his mother's memory like something dangerous. Still, as he spoke, he could no longer ignore the suffering his decision had caused. Catherine faced him with quiet firmness. She said she would never allow herself to become a weapon in the unfinished battle between his parents. She was willing to honor Diana, protect her legacy, and carry the responsibility attached to the jewels. But she would not build that honor upon another woman's humiliation. William lowered his eyes, because he understood the truth behind her words. The confession came slowly. William admitted that part of him had wanted Camilla to see the collection. He had wanted the queen consort to understand that Diana could not be removed from the monarchy's history by private requests or sealed cases. The future king recognized that grief had shaped his timing, even if the release itself had been lawful. Catherine then offered a different path. She proposed that Diana's jewels should never return to permanent darkness, but they should appear only when their meaning matched her service. Selected pieces could be worn at events connected to children, mental health, and humanitarian work. Memory would become purpose, not punishment. William agreed. He decided to establish a formal family protocol, a written rule controlling how historically important royal possessions could be used, so no individual could privately block them because of personal discomfort. Catherine removed the tiara and placed it into his hands. William held it for several seconds before returning it to the case himself. Next time, he said, it will not be about conflict. Their decision gave the palace a direction. But outside the gates, one photograph had already escaped their control. By morning, the private struggle inside Buckingham Palace had become a public symbol, and millions were deciding what Catherine's entrance meant for the monarchy. At 6 o'clock the next morning, one photograph appeared across television screens, newspaper sites, and station kiosks throughout Britain. Catherine stood beneath the palace chandeliers wearing Diana's sapphire tiara, while several feet behind her, Camilla stared in stunned silence. The image required no explanation. It captured inheritance, discomfort, memory, and succession in a single frame. And by sunrise, it had become one of the most discussed royal photographs of the decade. Broadcasters moved quickly. One morning program called Catherine's Entrance, a defining transfer of emotional authority, from the older royal generation to the future king and queen. Emotional authority means the public trust and feeling attached to a royal figure beyond formal rank. The words mattered because they suggested something deeper than fashion. The image had made William and Catherine look like the clear guardians of Diana's memory. Palace communications tried to slow the storm. A measured statement confirmed that the jewels had been released through proper channels and worn to honor continuity, service, and family history. Palace Communications is the official team responsible for explaining royal decisions to the public. Yet the careful wording could not control what viewers saw in Camilla's face. Public sympathy split almost immediately. Some people saw the Queen's expression as the pain of a woman permanently judged against the past. Others saw it as the result of trying to restrict Diana's place inside the monarchy. Camilla read both arguments in a private press summary and quietly pushed the pages away. The Queen knew the photograph had become more powerful than any official explanation. Catherine felt no triumph. The princess asked her communications team not to describe the evening as a victory over Camilla. She said Diana's jewels should never be used to celebrate another woman's humiliation. Still, the headlines grew sharper, and the future queen understood that her intentions no longer belonged only to her. The crisis deepened when one newspaper published details of the unofficial restriction placed on the collection. Charles approved a second statement, confirming that an internal review was underway and that no consort held private authority over Diana's possessions. A consort is the spouse of a reigning monarch, sharing public duties without holding the sovereign's powers. The king also declared that important personal jewels would now be governed by formal custodial rules, not private household wishes. Outside Kensington Palace, a small crowd gathered carrying blue flowers and handwritten cards. One card read, "Diana remembered, Catherine respected." Cameras captured a mother lifting her young daughter so she could place flowers near the railings. William watched the moment later in silence, while Catherine turned away from the screen. The public had delivered its emotional judgment, but the final verdict still belonged to Charles, Camilla, William, and Catherine. The world had turned the jewels into a symbol, yet only one family meeting could decide whether that symbol would divide the monarchy or finally force it to heal. 2 days after the reception, Charles called William, Catherine, and Camilla into the private library at Clarence House. There were no advisors, no official minutes, and no jewels displayed between them. Only 4 chairs stood around a small table. The king began without ceremony. He said the monarchy could not move forward by pretending its most painful history had never happened, and it could not protect the living by silencing the memory of the dead. Charles placed the investigation summary on the table and confirmed that no legal basis had ever existed for restricting Diana's collection. The monarch cancelled Camilla's unofficial request and ordered every connected instruction removed from the household files. Clarence House is the London residence used by the king and queen, but that morning it became the place where private fear was finally separated from royal authority. The king then established a permanent protocol giving William and Catherine shared responsibility for the future ceremonial use of Diana's most significant jewels, under formal oversight from the royal collection. A protocol is a written set of rules guiding official decisions, while the royal collection is the organization responsible for protecting historic items held by the monarchy. The decision ensured that no private preference could again silence part of the family's history. Camilla spoke after a long silence. The queen admitted that her reaction had come from fear, not authority. In a recorded account prepared after the meeting, she confessed that Catherine's entrance made her feel as though decades of service could vanish beneath one flash of sapphire. She had not feared the diamonds themselves. She had feared what people remembered when they saw them. Catherine answered without cruelty. The princess told Camilla she had never intended to replace or humiliate her. Yet she also said respect for the queen could not require the family to diminish Diana. Catherine's voice remained gentle, but her meaning was firm. Peace built on erasure would never be real peace. William then accepted his own part. The prince acknowledged that grief had shaped the timing of the appearance and apologized for keeping Camilla uninformed. But he did not apologize for returning his mother's jewels to public royal life. The future king said memory should not be used as a weapon, but neither should it be locked away to protect discomfort. Charles delivered the final decision. Diana's collection would never again be hidden because its meaning was difficult. It would be worn with restraint, purpose, and respect, never as ammunition in another family conflict. Camilla looked at Catherine and finally said, "They belong with the future now." The princess reached across the table and placed her hand over hers. The gesture did not erase their history, but it ended the battle. The jewels had crowned no winner and exposed no defeated rival. They had forced the family to accept one final truth. Remembrance was not rebellion. Inheritance was not revenge, and dignity became strongest when history was neither worshipped nor erased. The palace doors closed on the dispute, and Diana's jewels returned to their case, not as forbidden relics, but as accepted symbols of a past finally allowed to stand beside the future. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.